campus of the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, the Utah Debate Commission welcomes you to the 4th Congressional District Candidates Debate.
Good evening, and welcome to our debate featuring the major party candidates running in Utah's 4th Congressional District. I'm Lauren Gustus, Executive Editor of the Salt Lake Tribune. It is my pleasure to moderate tonight's exchange, which is sponsored by the Utah Debate Commission, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to educating voters and encouraging the civil exchange of ideas. The candidates who were invited tonight are the Democratic challenger, Ms. Darlene McDonald, Republican incumbent Representative Burgess Owens, and United Utah Party nominee January Walker. Ms. McDonald and Ms. Walker accepted that invitation. Representative Burgess Owens declined and is not here this evening. During this debate, the candidates will be answering my questions as well as those from a panel of journalists and students. You are welcome to participate also. If you are watching or listening live, send your reactions and questions on social media using the hashtag UTDebates. I'll fold in as many of those questions as time allows. The format for this debate is as follows. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to a question, along with the opportunity for 30 seconds of rebuttal time. At my discretion, I may pose a follow-up question. A random drawing held prior to the debate determined that Ms. Walker will get the initial response to the first question. We'll then alternate who answers first on the remaining questions throughout the debate. Let's get started. Ms. Walker, our first question. Please tell us what differentiates you from other candidates in this race.
Thank you so much for having me here. There are a lot of things that differentiate me from the other candidates in the race, but the number one thing that sets me apart, not just from this race, but every single candidate in the entire country, is my ability to create solutions for incredibly complex problems. In the private sector, I do this by analyzing the populations, and then based off of the information that's been presented, I go through and I come up with a list of opportunities that we could potentially explore. And then by listening to the individuals that I am representing, I go through and I come up with a solution that's best based off of that information. But more than anything that it comes to solutions, the number one thing that sets me apart is I have come up with a solution to provide every single constituent of mine an opportunity to give direct feedback to me and to have that feedback be counted and to aggregate that information into meaningful legislation at the end of the day. So every single constituent of mine will be able to get a direct voice in the legislation that I create, something that is sorely missing in our nation.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Ms. McDonald, same question.
Thank you, Lauren. It is a pleasure to be on the stage with you, and also with the distinguished guests in the audience as well as on the stage. What sets me apart from others in this race, I will have to say first and foremost, is my experience. My experience comes as a mother, my experience as a single mom, my experience as an employee, my experience even as a mother who has lost a child, a mother with a child with autism. I say this because we have many challenges that we are faced here in Utah. And those challenges requires a representative that is going to show up and going to listen to the constituents of Congressional District 4. I have been here in Utah now for 20 years. And when that call is made, I show up. That is what sets me apart from the current representative of Congressional District 4. And I will show up for every constituent in CD4. Whether you have voted for me or not, I will represent you. That is what sets me apart.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald, this is our second question, new thread, and we'll start with you. How do you assess the current state of politics in our country? What would you change?
Lauren, that is a very good question. Thank you very much for asking. I know that there are many people out there who are frustrated with the divisiveness of our current politics. We have people who are afraid to even put a political sign in their yard for one party for fear that their neighbors will shoot their house or shoot their window or even deface the sign that's in their yard. It is okay to have difference of opinions about politics. It is not okay to use that as a personal attack against your neighbor. Love thy neighbor. I take that very literal. I take that to mean that we should at least know who our neighbors are and get to know our neighbors and have conversations with them. To be able to even break bread with them. It is good when you can share a good meal with people, even with people that you don't agree with. You can at least come to some common ground, some common consensus. But we don't have that today in our current politics because it's always about getting one up over the other. So we have to do better.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Walker, same question.
Yes. So when we look at the current state of politics, what is apparent to all of us is there is a divide. But the question begs, what is causing that current divide? And as a candidate, one of the things that became very apparent over time is that the people that are currently elected in office have absolutely no incentive to fix the problems that are in our nation today. They actually profiteer off of it. And when we look at the major political parties, they feed off of each other like parasites. And when it comes to taking a look at who we have on the ballot, it doesn't matter in this day and age if you choose to vote for a Democrat or a Republican anymore, because the result and the solutions that come from them will be the exact same that we've seen for decades now. And if you don't believe me, I would take one of our most divisive issues that we're seeing and we'll just bring it up to the front of the stage here, and that is abortion. And when we look at abortion, this could have been solved a long, long time ago, at least 70 years. But neither party has any investment in actually fixing issues. And they both have an investment in preventing third-party candidates from having any elected office whatsoever. So keep that in mind. There is divisiveness, but it's caused by the major political parties.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Walker. We've already got a question from social, which is great, as you both know. As folks may know who are tuning in, we've got all kinds of platforms who are sharing this debate tonight. So this question comes from TDC via YouTube. And they ask, many in the primaries have been putting down members of the opposing party. What is one genuine good thing you can say about each party's members? And because we've got three parties ostensibly in this race, potentially more, if you would just pick one good thing. And let's start with you, Ms. Walker, please.
Yes, it's actually really interesting that this question was asked, because as I was going through my campaign, one of the questions that we would go out into the public and ask people is, what is your shade of purple? And the requirement is that you would share with us what your political party affiliation was, and then you would tell us one thing that you liked about the opposing party. So I really appreciate this. Since I am in the middle, I'm going to say one thing quickly about each. When it comes to the Democrats, I actually truly appreciate that they take the social front and put in the effort to make sure that everybody is felt like they're heard and included. And when it comes to the Republican front, I really appreciate that they champion fiscal responsibility.
Great, thank you. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you very much. I would have to say that the good thing about having everyone at the table, and that is having all political parties at the table, having a diverse voices at the table, is that you create better policies. And one of the good things that I would say about the Republican Party is being able to provide a check on the Democrats. Let's say if there is a bill that spends a little bit too much, that someone in the Republican Party could say, maybe that's a little too high. We also have Joe Manchin for the Democratic Party that does that as well. For the United Party, I have to say, I get it. I understand. We have been let down many times by the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party, not actually solving the problems. And you're right, sometimes even self-dealing, like with the stocks. We need to be able to have solutions. And what I appreciate about being a Democrat is that we have a coalition. We are a coalition party where we bring people far left as Senator Sanders to as far right as Joe Manchin, and come to the table to actually put forth the best policy for everyone and be able to have solutions.
Great. Thank you, Ms. McDonald. I'd like to talk a little bit about the election here in Utah. There are candidates in 4 of 6 contested county clerk races here in Utah that have publicly referenced conspiracy theories connected to the legitimacy of the 2020 election. And for those of you who are doing the math, there are 22 county clerk races that are uncontested, 1 in which there is no race this year, which gets us to our total 29 counties in Utah. My question is this: do you believe that the 2020 presidential election was fair and accurate? And what would you say to those running in this race who don't think that the results were fair?
Thank you very much. I guess that's for me.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes, Lauren, I do believe that the 2020 election was fair and accurate. And we are in very dangerous times right now. We are in very dangerous times because there are election deniers that are on the ballot. And those election deniers pose a threat to not only this election this year that's happening in November, but also to our future elections, 2024, for example. We have a current county clerk, person who is running for county clerk, who wants to fundamentally change the way that we do elections here in Utah. One thing that I have to say about Utah elections in the Utah State Legislature, I don't always agree with many things that they do, but one thing that I can say, we do elections right here in Utah. We do it right. And we owe that to our state legislatures as well as our county clerks, who made sure, in Salt Lake County especially, who made sure that she stepped up and made elections easier for the people of Utah. Our state delegation should have went on a nationwide tour to show people how we do it here and how we do it right, but they did not do that. They fell in line with the national party with the election integrity and other things. We do elections right here, and you can trust the election systems here.
Ms. Walker, do you think that the 2020 election was fair? And do you have thoughts for those who are running in this race who don't think that those results were fair?
Yes, absolutely. So I do believe that the 2020 election was fair and accurate. And one of the comments that was made recently was, I get it, when it comes to why moderate voters and the majority of not just Utah, but the United States as a whole is disenfranchised. And the reason is because when we look at the elections and the people's concerns that they expressed, instead of going through and trying to find solutions in which we could bridge the divide, instead we told them to sit down and to be quiet and accept that the election results were real without offering real viable solutions for the future. And as part of my campaigning, when I first started it, is I went through and I talked to the people that were election deniers. And I asked them, what would it take for you to have full confidence in the United States elections once again. And from this, they said that the elections had to be transparent, they had to be easily auditable, they had to be accessible to individuals across the nation, and they had to take care of some of the issues, especially for our military members that have ever tried to vote, to have that easy accessibility. So with this, by modernizing our voting, we can eliminate any lack of confidence in our elections from here on out.
Yes, please, Ms. McDonald, do you have a response?
Yes, I do. I want to piggyback off of that just a little bit, that I do agree in voter disenfranchisement. And I agree in voter disenfranchisement because too many people, especially here in Utah, have been told that their vote does not matter. And every vote matters. And that caused people to actually stay home on election day or not even return that ballot. Every vote matters. So do not listen to people when they say that your vote does not matter. Every vote matters.
Please.
I 100% agree that every single vote matters. But my problem is this, is that when a major political party dismisses a huge chunk of people and says, your concerns are not valid. So the solutions that I've brought forward, I've found very fascinating that individuals in the Democratic Party have outright said, you know, you need to just deal with the voting systems that we have today, even though people have expressed concerns around them. There is nothing wrong with modernizing the way that we vote.
Thank you both. All right, I believe we are starting with Ms. Walker on this question. This is a follow-up, so 30 seconds, please.
I could, thank you. I could follow up to this.
Oh, no, sorry. I've got a follow-up question,
which
is kind of confusing, and forgive me. I have a follow-up question. So we've got 30 seconds for this question. Okay. Don't think it's a long one. On January 6th, violent protesters overran the Capitol, beat police officers, sprayed them with bear spray, and chanted that the Republican vice president should be hanged. Do you support congressional and other efforts to investigate what happened on January 6th?
Yes, I do support efforts to investigate any and all incidences like this. And the reason is because when something happens, there is a reasonable expectation to have these matters looked into, to investigate any accusations. That is a fully reasonable ask. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. McDonald.
January 6th was a black mark on our democracy. Everyone in America should take January 6th seriously. If you care about our democracy, if you care about the Constitution, if you care about our future in America, you should care about January 6th. It was an insurrection. It should be investigated. It is being investigated. And I encourage everyone to follow the January 6th Commission.
Great. Thank you. Ms. McDonald, this question will come to you, but I'm going to ask you to give me just a second. I believe this is my longest preamble of the evening. I had hoped that Representative Owens would be here tonight. I'm fairly confident that you had hoped that he would come as well. And this statement, which I will share with you, was a direct quote from Burgess Owens, and it was the impetus for actions that led to his pulling out of the debate today. It pertains to immigration. On the migrant crisis at the border, Representative Burgess Owens last year said, and I quote, "They are coming to your neighborhoods, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, and there is a cartel influence along the way. So be aware. Don't think this is a distance from you now. This is coming your way, and it is done on purpose by a party who could care less about we the people." So my question is this. More than 2 million people have been arrested trying to cross the border this year, more than ever before. How does your thinking differ from Representative Owens? And how might we solve for what's happening on our southern border?
I take this pretty personally. Representative Owens' statements that he made in April of 2001 mimics the statements that were made by the KKK about people who look like me and people who look like him. He went to the southern border to denigrate people who are looking for a better life, just like so many people like my father, who left Alabama to go to Ohio. People like the Mormon pioneers who left Missouri and landed right here in Utah. I took this statement in my heart when he made that statement last year. And for him to pull out of this debate tonight, citing racism over a statement that he himself made, is cowardly. If you think that someone is bullying you and you think that they are racist, then you stand up to them. You come here and you stand up to them. That is what I would have done. That is what I have been doing. I have been standing up. When people call me and they say that their children have been bullied on the school bus, I show up. That is what he should have done. Show up and say, I did not appreciate that statement. And then we could have said, all we did was just copy your statement. He has to rethink how he say and speak as well.
Thank you. Ms. Walker.
I'd like to echo what Darlene McDonald has stated here today. I definitely agree with everything that you have said. In addition to that, Representative Owens has displayed cowardice. I think that most people here would agree with that. And the reason that he is choosing not to show up to this debate has absolutely nothing to do with the cartoon and everything to do with not being able to speak clearly and concisely. He has been in controlled environments for 2 years now, without the ability to speak freely. If you take him out of those scenarios, he does not have the ability to speak coherently. He has openly admitted to having CTE or suspecting to have CTE, which that's his prerogative to share. But ultimately what it comes down to is, what exactly is the difference here from the Republican standpoint of saying, hey, Biden is 79 years old, he's no longer there in full mental capacity. So what is the point of making that claim when you yourself are a 71-year-old man? There's little to no difference between those two. And when it comes to immigration, we have solutions that we can topple the immigration bureaucracy and everything that surrounds it, and makes it so that immigrants can come into this country and have access to the ability to learn the languages that they need to be able to unite with their families, to be able to be in their neighborhoods. And there's absolutely no reason in the year 2020, no reason in the year 2020 to continue any form of racism against any person or skin color. And thank you so much. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Okay, so we did not get to much by way of policy. Let's just take 30 seconds. And that way you can continue, Ms. Walker, in 1 minute. The rebuttal goes first to Ms. McDonald.
Thank you very much. And I do apologize for that, because it is such a personal issue. For 30 years, Democrats and Republicans, for 30 years, could have solved this problem. The reason to not solve this problem is exactly what's happening right now in this election cycle at the southern border, where they use the immigration crisis as a political wedge issue. We are talking about human beings, not a football. These are human beings, cannot be used as your political football. Let's solve this immigration problem by coming to the table, sitting down, and actually working this out, because we can.
Okay, thank you.
There's absolutely no scenario in which Republicans and Democrats will work anything out ever. This has been manufactured, and it is intentional. We have solutions today that can allow people to easily prove their identity and make it so that they can come into the country as law-abiding citizens. These individuals are showing up and here to follow our laws. And I think that we need to stop talking and actually start taking action.
Okay, we don't have time for more rebuttals. We've actually hit the halfway point of this, the 4th District debate, featuring Democratic challenger, Ms. Darlene McDonald, and the Utah United Party nominee, January Walker. Republican incumbent Mr. Burgess Owens was invited but has chosen not to attend. I'm Lauren Gustis, editor of the Salt Lake Tribune, and I'm your moderator tonight. We are still taking your questions during this live broadcast. Use the hashtag UTDebates on social media to share your questions and thoughts. Now let's get back to those questions. Okay. We will start with Ms. Walker, and I'd like to transition to inflation.
Yes.
So we've spent some money. We've spent some money as Americans, more so certainly than we have at this time last year. There are estimates that the average U.S. household is spending $400 to $600 more a month. So I'd like to focus specifically on gas prices, which Utahns feel acutely. What can Congress do to provide some relief for those who are paying at the pump?
There are a few things that we can do to actually start to fight inflation. This is one of the main points of my platform. And this is going to be multifold. So first of all, we have to be able to track and trace government spending down to the very last penny so that we can take that inflationary price and bring it down. And we have the technology today to do that will actually additionally allow us to eliminate the national debt. So that's going to have a direct impact on this inflation. And that's something that Congress can do. Another thing that we can do is improve our supply chains. Again, there is technology available today, implemented at the largest companies throughout the world, that will allow us to ease the supply chain and actually be able to lower gas prices at the pump. And then in addition to this, I think that we all know and understand that these petrol companies are in fact practicing predatory practices on consumers. And it is time to actually bring them to the table and hold them accountable for what they're doing. They know that they are practicing cronyism, and that cronyism has been enabled by both Republicans and the Democrats. Because if they actually wanted to fix this problem, as they have had the opportunity for decades, they would have done it already. But neither of them profits or stays elected by doing so.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have spent the money. In year 2020, we experienced what was a global pandemic. The production stopped, and we had a supply chain bottleneck. That meant nothing got out, nothing got produced. So in order to get the economy going again, the Fed chair, the Republican-appointed Fed chair, Jerome Powell, had to put money into the economy because people were losing their homes. They couldn't go to work. They had to stay home. The economy was shut down. So now the Fed chair is trying to roll that back. And he does that by increasing the interest rates. This is macroeconomics. This is not with the actual Congress. This is with the Fed chair. That is his job, the Fed chair. What Congress can do, and what Congress has been doing, is trying to address the issue of price gouging with the gas prices. Representative Owens voted against that. That is one way that Congress can hold the oil companies accountable for the pain that we are feeling at the pump. The interest rates are going up, but the prices are not going down. That means that there's something else going on here, and just as January said, this is corporate greed, and we need to address corporations for not bringing those prices down when we're doing what we're supposed to do with the interest rates.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald, next question will go to you first, and it comes to us from Fox 13 reporter Ben Winslow.
Good evening to both of you. The West is gripped by drought. The Great Salt Lake, as you know, is at its lowest point in its recorded history. So my question is, what federal policy solutions do you see as necessary to help Utah and our neighboring states right now?
Me?
Yes.
Mr. Winslow. Ben, thank you very much for asking that question. Yes, we're experiencing an historic drought. My campaign did a TikTok video. We went to the Great Salt Lake and filmed it to show people exactly what was going on at the Great Salt Lake. Because until you see it with your eyes, many people didn't really fully understand what was actually happening. And what we have right now is we have a representative in Burgess Owens who did not fight for Utah and the Great Salt Lake when it came time to actually passing the Inflation Reduction Act. Western states fought for and got $4 billion for that. We had no one in our Utah delegation to fight for the Great Salt Lake. This is going to require representation that's going to work across everybody, partisan line, to come to the table to solve this problem. A one-party state cannot solve this problem. A one-party Congress cannot solve this problem. We all must work together to solve this.
Ms. Walker, Fox 13's question from Ben Winslow. The West is gripped by drought. What can we do about it?
Yes, there is actually a lot that we can do about the Western water crisis. In my listening campaign, I went around to each city within the district and I talked to them about their water infrastructure and what would it take to get the resources to replace the aging pipes, or what was their number one need. And they've all said, we have an aging water infrastructure. And from that inflation bill that they passed, only $4 billion of that was allocated to water. Water is a necessity. It is a human need, and only $4 billion. And of that, it expected these cities to come up with millions of dollars out of these small towns to be able to pay and replace the infrastructure that they have. And that infrastructure is costing us about 25% of our allocated water resources. So we're just wasting water on this level. The other thing that we have the ability to do, again, we have technology. There's proof of concepts around this where we can implement water metering solutions to actually track and trace the water and where it's going. One of the number one reasons that we do not have enough water or we're overusing water is because we don't understand the usage that is going into it, and we do not have the tools in place to collaborate across state lines.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, this next question will come first to you, and it is from a University of Utah student, Nahom Tedessa. Please.
Thank you. And thank you both for choosing to be here today. My question deals with higher education. Education is one of the few ways in which marginalized communities are able to close equity gaps. However, with the cost of education continuing to grow, it's becoming harder and harder to get an education. And even if you're able to get an education, you're put into a hole of college debt, which many are kept in for years. So my question for the both of you is, what plans do you have to make higher education more affordable and accessible to all?
Thank you so much. So education, this is actually a really interesting topic for me. When I first started my higher education, my entire semester cost about $800. By the time that I finished it, it was closer to $4,000. And that is an astronomical spike in education costs. And I can't imagine the people that are continuing to go through this. One of the solutions that has been brought to the table is providing a free education across the United States for every American. And I think that right now, we do not have the resources to fully explore that. However, with one of the solutions that I mentioned earlier, the ability to track and trace government spending, we can actually start to find money that might be able to be used and allocated towards it. So for example, in 2021, we misappropriated $662 billion. If we can prevent that misappropriation happening in the future, perhaps there's a conversation to be had about how we can deliver to students today. In addition to this, something that I would also like for us to explore is moving back the education that we have in these college courses into K through 12 and actually pushing our students so that when they turn the age of 18, we have a viable workforce that's prepared and ready to serve the community.
Ms. McDonald.
Thank you very much. This is actually a big part of my platform. Higher education is one of the most overlooked parts of our education system. We provide funding for our secondary and primary education, but no money for higher education. Because by federal law, when a person reaches the age of 22, that's it, they're out of the system. There's no more public funds for them. So what I promote that we do is we fund higher education and make sure that we allocate enough money in our budget that would also fund higher education on the same level that we fund our primary and as well as secondary education. Because for me, it's about breaking that chain of intergenerational poverty. And we know that there's a direct link between intergenerational poverty and education. And we have too many people who fall between the cracks and they don't finish that high school degree and they can't get that promotion at work. They fall between the cracks. This impacts their wage earning potential as well. So we must allocate those resources for our higher education as well as for our primary and secondary education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. You've talked about allocating support or funding to education. And Ms. McDonald, this question is for you first. Since the war started in Ukraine, the U.S. has allocated more than $17.5 billion in support of the Ukraine's war against Russia. Should we be doing more or less on that front as we look at all of the other priorities that exist?
Whether or not we should be doing more or less really depends upon what our direct work with the Ukrainian people. But this is the work with the State Department. And working with the State Department, as a member of Congress, they come to us and say, hey, we need to give some money to Ukraine. That is something that hopefully we can be able to come together and say, we probably do. I know what I personally feel, and what I personally feel, yes, we should provide as much resources as we possibly can to Ukraine. And the reason for that is because Ukraine is fighting for democracy. If we truly believe in democracy in this country, as we say we do, then we have to stand up for democracy here at home and also stand up for the people in Ukraine. We also have to remember how this even started. It started because we didn't stand up for Ukraine when the previous administration was there. We had people who actually made excuses for that. We have to, if we're going to say we stand up for democracy, we have to stand up for Ukraine.
Thank you. Ms. Walker?
Our first priorities should be to the American people. This is specifically in terms of inflation. By taking care of our inflation solutions at home, we can actually impact the rest of the world as they rely on our dollar to be strong. By sending resources in terms of weaponry over to the Ukraine, I think that that is fine to help them and assist them on that platform. Is in terms of sending our troops over to the Ukraine, that is not appropriate. We have been, in my lifetime, the majority of my lifetime has been riddled with war, and we can no longer stand beside war. We have to actually prioritize the people and talk to individuals and say, hey, if you sorry, let me take a step back here. So when we talk about the Ukrainian war, it does come down to a lack of communication, and it does come down to not talking to the correct individuals. And if you cannot break through with the leader of that country, then you have the conversations elsewhere to break through to them until they can come back and convince him to step down and step aside and let people be free.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, this next question is coming your direction, and we're joined by University of Utah student Elise Ellsworth.
All right, thank you. Multiple sources have ranked Utah as the worst state to live in for working women. As a mother of a daughter and a career-driven woman finishing my degree myself, my question to you is, what will you do to help improve gender equality in Utah?
The first thing that I would do is getting a female elected to federal office in Utah, seeing as we have 0 elected currently. And the same goes for our state legislature, where we have, I believe it's 27% of our elected there. Another part of supporting women actually comes down to making sure that our caregivers have the resources to take care of their children as they go through and work. So what that means is currently today, we have some of the highest educated female populations in the nation. And yet, when they go and they start their families, they do not have the ability to perform both the jobs that align best to their skill set and be able to have the time that they need to spend with their kids. By bringing in or incentivizing companies to bring in high-paying part-time work will actually be able to bring more individuals into the workforce, grow the economy there, and allow for women to take their place in the business world. The other side of this is we have got to start prioritizing our paid time off. We cannot take care of our kids and our families and still work ourselves to death and leave with the same regrets as generations before us around not being able to live our lives.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald.
Thank you very much. So this hits very much also with my platform. I have a platform called Cradle to the Grave, and the maternal mortality rate here in the United States, as well as in Utah, but here in the United States, we have the highest maternal mortality rate in all of the industrialized countries. And even here in Utah, that number goes up. That means we are losing more of our mothers during and immediately after childbirth. So what I say is, if you're going to be pro-life, then you have to nurture all lives from the cradle to the grave. That means we have to get rid of the gender pay wage gap. It should not even exist. We have to hold corporations accountable for that. That means we have to have access to health care, making sure that everyone can have sick pay leave as well, and maternal leave as well. We have to make sure that we take care of our women, and as you say, there isn't a woman in our Utah federal delegation, but we need to be at the table with all of them, because when they pass bills like making sure that women don't have the right to contraception, if you have a woman that's on the Utah delegation, she would say, not on my watch.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Thank you, Ms. Ellsworth. Let's stick with women's health. I'd like to ask you to think on specifics with respect to this question, because I'm fairly confident that you've spent a good bit of time in preparation and or thinking about it. So, Ms. McDonald, this question is to you first. Now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned as it is, do you feel Congress should enact a national policy, or should states decide what's best? I.e., should Senator Lindsey Graham's legislation to create a national abortion ban at 15 weeks be passed? Or should Congress move in another direction? And if so, specifically, in what direction?
Thank you very much. Was that it?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. Specific policies that I would advocate for is to make sure that insurance companies will pay for doulas and midwives. We used to have access to doulas and midwives once upon a time. That went away. I know that there is a policy in Medicaid that allows for doulas. It's a very small amount. We need to increase that and make sure that insurance companies will also cover that fee. The Supreme Court decision to push reproductive freedom to the states basically made free states and unfree states for women. Women in unfree states will have their health and their lives in jeopardy. Because what we have to understand about a woman's reproductive freedom and rights, and especially about her health care, you have to first understand a woman's health care needs. If a woman has an ectopic pregnancy, and that is when the egg can't drop down from those fallopian tubes, that is a medical emergency that requires immediate medical attention. If you wait, you risk the life of that mother. It is not the role of government to decide a woman's reproductive rights or freedom. This is the one thing that even libertarians should walk with us on. It is not the role of government.
Thank you. Ms. Walker.
Thank you so much. When we look at issues like access to healthcare for women, we need to keep in mind that these topics are they're used to manipulate and divide us. They come from a room full of strategists from both the Republicans and the Democrats. They analyze our populations, and then based off of what data they think that to pull in different types of voters, they go through and they push different issues. So as you listen to these responses, as you listen to Republicans and Democrats alike, you have to remember that these messages have been carefully crafted for them. I do not agree that the government should be in any individual's body. It is time to remove the government from body at the state level, at the federal level. But we know that as long as we have Republicans and Democrats elected in office, this is not going to be fixed. And that means that you are leaving millions upon millions of women without protection in terms of health care. So how do we actually solve this, and how do we bridge the divide between Republicans and Democrats? Well, we look to the lowest common denominator, and the lowest common denominator is what we can agree on in terms of rape, risk to the life of the mother, making sure that if somebody is going to have like an ectopic pregnancy, that they have access to health care in these scenarios, and making sure that's implemented across the U.S.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. I wish we had more time for that conversation. We are joined now by University of Utah student Deanne Bahati, and she's got a question for you both, and we'll start with Ms. Walker.
Hello, thank you guys for having me. As a refugee, I know what it's like to feel unsafe and unprotected from a system that's supposed to protect us. So my question to you is, what can Congress do to address police brutality and racial inequality in an effective way? And as a follow-up question, what would you say the community can do to address these issues as well effectively?
Thank you so much for asking that question. When it comes to police brutality and what we can do to protect citizens, it's actually adjusting our approach. When we look at our police population, we expect them to go through incredibly difficult jobs and face danger every single day. And that has created a population, and this is through information that they have given me directly, this has created a population that has high levels of stress, high levels of fear, and they don't know if the next interaction will be their last. And so this means that we have to start prioritizing the mental health of our police officers. In addition to that, when it comes to protecting citizens, we have got to make sure that we have zero tolerance for abuse and overstepping the power that we give our officers. They have got to be held to the highest absolute standard. I did a calculation a few years ago, and I found that we have almost 1,000 people a year in the United States killed by our police. When you look at other countries and ratios of how many bullets they have fly, so for example, Germany, they only had 7 deaths and 13 bullets fly. We cannot account for how many bullets we have had discharged, and we need to start keeping track of these metrics and make sure that we are following up on all instances in which they have not, or in which a life was taken.
Ms. Walker, thank you. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. It's a very good question. Seeking asylum is law. It is not illegal to seek asylum. This is one thing that I actually am very proud to be a Utahn about. The Utah Compact on Immigration. This is actually, that's another one of those things, like the way we do election, the way that we embrace immigrants and the immigrants community here in Utah is actually something that Democrats and Republicans agree on here in Utah, and embracing our refugee community, making sure that they are safe. You also have to have some education with law enforcement, because in different countries, that interaction with law enforcement could be different. Because in some countries, it is not safe to actually have a member of law enforcement coming after you, depending on what country you're coming from. So you have to have that education with the refugee community to know how they will feel safe here. So again, this is something that we do very well here in Utah, embracing our refugee community, and we welcome many refugees into the state and provide a home for them and make sure that they can feel as safe as possible and be able to have access to education as well, so that they can fulfill their dreams. So I welcome you as well.
Thank you for that question, Deanne. This is our last question before closing statements, and we don't have much time, so we're going to take just 30 seconds on it. We'll start with you, Ms. McDonald.
This question or the closest?
This one right here that I'm about to ask. Thank you for that clarification. In August, the state of Utah sued President Biden over restoration of Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, national monuments. Who should make decisions about the size of these lands? Yes, please.
This is where I say we can work directly with our Native American community, our tribal community, and making sure that we respect and honor our Native American cultures and see what's best within, not only within their community, but also how to bring that into Utah. This is, I will work with our Native American community, and as well as the small communities within each and every national monument territory, so that we can get the best solution.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Ms. Blacker?
Thank you so much. When it comes down to these lands, I think that we absolutely have to have our stakeholders, or the people that it impacts the most, as part of these conversations. And this means transcending not just the federal level, but the state level and the citizen level. With the solutions that I've proposed, we will actually be able to solicit feedback from these individuals and make decisions that are best for them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We've now reached the end of our debate. A random drawing held earlier determined that the first closing statement would go to Ms. Walker.
Thank you so much. What I would like for you to take from this debate is that the Republican and Democratic parties no longer serve you. They stopped serving the people. They stopped serving us a long time ago. And they go through and they have this, I would say, a very poor relationship with media in which they feed off of each other. And we know this because humans like sensationalism, but healing is not sensationalism. It does not sell. And the other thing that we need to remember is that at the end of the day, these issues that get brought up, they are not for the people anymore. They are really just, what can we say to manipulate these populations into voting for us? It is a numbers game. And this is why you experience this cycle where every 2 to 3 months, it feels like there's some new issue that's coming up. It's manipulation. It's a manipulation, the entire thing. It's fake.
Ms. Walker, it's time.
Hope you have an amazing one.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McDonald.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on the stage tonight, and thank you very much for viewing in, for those of you who are at home. I am running for Congress because I believe in representation. On this stage tonight, we see that one member, our current representative, Burgess Owens, did not show up. There are many of you out there today who have never checked the box for a Democrat before in their lives. I am asking for your vote tonight because we need representation. We need representatives in Washington who are going to show up, who are going to be there for you, who's going to fight for the Great Salt Lake, who's going to fight for the health care for you and your family, who's going to work to make sure that they do not take away your Social Security and your Medicare. I will fight for you just as hard as I fought for my family. My name is Darlene McDonald, and I'm running for Congressional District 4.
Our thanks to candidates Darlene McDonald and January Walker for their participation tonight. The Utah Debate Commission also thanks our panelists, those who submitted questions, and all at the University of Utah for making this event possible, with special appreciation to both the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation and Zion's Bake, as well as the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation for their generous support. Join us Friday at 6 p.m. for the 2nd Congressional District Debate. I'm Lauren Gustis. Thank you, and have a good night.